Hey guys, so today Jet, Ashir, and I will be covering what it takes to become a great listener. So, as we all know, there is a difference between simply just hearing what someone is saying, letting it go in one ear and out the other, as opposed to critically thinking, critically listening, and analyzing what is actually being said and also processing it. As we've learned before in class, critical listening in this context means using careful, systematic thinking and reasoning to see whether a message makes sense in light of factual evidence. So, being a good listener takes not only processing the information that you are hearing, it's also about making sure that the information you're hearing is credible and reliable as well as truthful. Thinking about all of the media that we consume and all the things we hear just on a day-to-day basis, it is really important to see if the information you're taking in is factual information, is truthful. Like think about just TikTok. How many videos do we watch on TikTok that people claim to be science or people claim to be evidence or like facts and they're really just not. So I think it's just a really important skill to have to be able to distinguish how this information can affect you, whether it is truthful or not. Um, on to the next slide. So we included this quote. It's by Ernest Hemingway. He says, I like to listen. I have learned a great deal from listening carefully. Most people never listen, which honestly, I think there is some truth to that. A lot of people don't really use great critical listening skills. So it's important to have those. So some methods we will cover. Um, so we will be covering methods to becoming a better listener, distinguishing different types of listening, examples of the types of listening. We'll be recognizing when to engage in different types of listening. We will be discussing noise and communication, as well as levels of communication.
So what are some methods? The first method we'll be talking about is the wait method, or why am I talking? And in the wait method, there is a heavy emphasis on introspection, the reflection of your leadership, and the significance of your words. So why are you talking? The second method is the empathetic listening method, where you are listening to understand someone else's perspective and experience. So you're putting yourself in someone else's shoes. The third method is critical listening. So you're applying critical thinking skills to fully understand the complexities, the validity, and every facet of the message given. And improv listening is where you're listening to understand, and listening to understand the entire body of someone's language, and attempting a balance in that conversation. And remember, there are many different aspects of each of these methods, and they can each be combined to better suit different situations. So should you distinguish between the methods? Yes, and it is very important to see where they differ. So for the wait versus improv, in the wait method, you are very much focusing and deliberating why you are talking. You have to understand the significance of your words and what impact they have. So you are very much focusing on what you have to say. And when you are listening in the way that you have to be mindful of what you're going to say, you are also just really focusing on your importance in the conversation. But in the improv method, you are focusing on what they are saying. You are trying to understand every last facet of what the other person is saying in their language in order to have the respect and have a good conversation by achieving a balance and where you are showing that you fully understand what that person is saying, and so in doing that, they will attempt to do the same with you. And when you ping pong in that sort of way, you are trying to achieve better conversation by achieving a better balance. And how critical listening differs from empathetic listening. Critical listening, you are analyzing the message to thoroughly understand the validity and the context behind it. So you are analyzing the message to just really sort of really like critically understand exactly what and why the person is saying what they are saying. And you are looking at it in a logical standpoint, so you are receiving the information and you are analyzing it in every implication and every bit of context that information has. But with empathetic listening, you are assuming that what they are saying is already valid. So you are doing what you can to understand their perspective of something by putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And you are not considering whether it is valid. So with that mindset, it is very different from critical listening. But all four of these types of listening can be combined into just good listening in general. But here are some examples that you can find of each of the different kinds of listening. So for the weight method, you'll find that politicians and executive leaders like to use this method a lot because what they say is very significant. What they say has a lot behind it and it carries a lot of responsibility. So in order to achieve better diplomacy, they have to be very mindful of what they are saying, especially to other leaders or other people who have the same responsibility. So high-level conversations, you'll find that people are very careful with their words. And in the improv method, you'll find that improv actors, hence why it's called the improv method, very much use this to achieve better performances. And they do this by trying to understand exactly what their on-stage partner is saying and doing in order to achieve a better balance to have the best, wittiest sort of comment or line. And it is very important in delivery and flow. So improv actors love to use improv listening. In critical listening, you'll find this in professional meetings or closing any kind of business deal or any type of informational handling. So even in lessons or lectures or any time you'll see information being displayed and you have to understand the information critically and the aspects of that information, and you have to understand why that information is true and the reasoning behind it. In empathetic listening, you'll find it in sensitive conversations between personal relationships, and when you are consoling someone or you're being consoled, you'll find that people need to use a lot of empathy. So you'll find empathetic language and you'll hear things in an empathetic manner, so it is empathetic listening. And when you should apply these skills you can find those skills from other places, but when you can apply these skills yourself, so the weight method is good for when you're working in a team or when you're the leader of some sort of group and you are delegating responsibility. When you understand that your words have a lot of significance in a situation or when you're trying to achieve a goal, you have to be very careful and you have to understand what your responsibility is with those words. So when you're working in a team, it is very important to understand exactly what you're going to say before you say it. And when you are listening to achieve the sort of best understanding of what you're supposed to say, that can very much help when you're trying to lead towards something. And improv listening is great for day-to-day conversation and good for both small talk and building relationships. So improv listening is very good in day-to-day conversation because the more you can do it casually and you can sort of give someone a lot of respect in the little things that they say and try to understand exactly what they're saying and try to sort of have the best conversation by just achieving a balance every single day, or not every single day, but just casually. And the more respect you give, the more respect you're going to get back. So it's good for building relationships because it builds trust and empathy between both members, because the more you understand what someone is saying, the more you understand who they are and what they are. So it's very great for just, friendships in general. And critical listening is just when you're analyzing some very important information or just information that you need to understand at that very moment. Critical listening is very important. So when you are also receiving some sort of instructions, reading a book or a manual, or receiving some sort of lesson or teaching, and anytime you're handling maybe someone else's information and you're handling just information and you're responsible for understanding what you have or what you're supposed to be listening to or reading, critical analysis and critical thinking is very important. And for empathetic listening, you can always use empathetic listening because, the golden rule where you want to treat others how you want to be treated. But with empathetic listening, you can also very much focus on it when you are in very sensitive or emotional conversations, and you have to show as much care for the other person's feelings or experience as possible, where you have to show that you are very much understanding what they are going through, and you are understanding that your perspective or their perspective is more important, and that you have to understand their perspective. So when you're listening with that in mind, it's very important that you show empathy in a sensitive or emotional conversation. And beyond the love or the types of communication, there is noise. So noise is any distraction that takes away from the attention and the comprehension of the listening. So noise can be anything from a poster in the wall to an annoying tune that's stuck in your head. And there are two different kinds of noise. External noise is anything that you cannot control or anything that is outside of your body or your mind. So the world, other people, other things, just things that are not physically within yourself. And internal noise is anything that's within your mind or your body and what you are. So your mood can very heavily influence how you're going to listen to things. When you're in a bad mood, it is harder to focus on some things or find some things tolerable, so you might not be a great listener. Or you can have past memories involving something, and that can get in the way of your judgment or how you listen to certain information. And your mental health can also be a very large factor in how you listen to things. So why noise is so important in listening is because the more you mitigate noise, the more you limit noise, the better you can focus on something, the better you can fully be present in a conversation. And noise is just a distraction, and it's important to limit distractions when you want to give respect to somebody in a conversation.
Now we will go to the next slide, which is slide 9. We'll talk about the 3 different things to consider when talking about this subject, which is, so we'll start the first one. Mitigating noise can really help you focus on the conversation, a lot of the conversation or information as a whole. The next one would be honing listening skills requires practice, just like anything, requires lots and lots of practice. Lastly, different situations call for different skill sets to be used, and different levels of listening can be required. This content will be on the next slide, which is slide 10. So we'll start with, these are the levels of communication. There's 6 of them. We'll start with the first one, which is level 1. Level 1, the listener creates a safe environment in which difficult, complex, or emotional issues can be discussed. That's level 1. Going on to level 2, which is the listener clears away distractions like phones and laptops or anything of that sorts, really focusing attention on the other person, making appropriate eye contact. This behavior not only affects how you are perceived as a listener, it immediately influences the listener's own attitudes and inner feelings, which makes sense. Acting the part changes how you feel inside. This, in turn, makes you a better listener. We will go on to level 3, which is seeking understanding. We'll get a more depth of level 3 on this. So level 3, the listener seeks to understand the substance of what the other person is saying. They capture ideas, they ask questions, and restate issues to confirm that their understanding is correct. Level 4, the listener observes nonverbal cues such as facial expressions, respiration rates, gestures, posture, and numerous other subtle body language signals. It is actually estimated that 80% of what we communicate comes from these signals. It sounds strange to some, but you listen with your ears as well as your eyes and ears. So lastly, we'll talk about level 6. We'll just go a little simple. Offering new perspective and asking clarifying questions. We'll get a little more depth in that. The listener asks questions that clarify assumptions The other person holds and helps the other person to see the issue in a new light. This could include the listening injecting some thoughts and ideas. Okay, we will go to the next slide. So we'll go over a review of what we've been through. We went over the types of listening. We went over the importance of good listening. And lastly, the noise and levels of communication. I would like to thank all of you for tuning in and getting to hear what we have to say. And y'all have a blessed day. Peace out.